Hey friends, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today I'm going to be reviewing Cirque's Glazed collection for 2025. Now, as I'm sure you know, this collection released about a month ago, but I figured it's better late than never to share these, especially for the comparisons. So a big thank you to Beyond Polish for sending these to me. As always, I will save up more of my thoughts for the end. So for now, let me just show you the swatches. The first polish in the collection is Açaí Jelly, and this one is described as a watermelon pink. I think I would also describe this as like a hot pink, definitely very warm leaning though. And the formula on this was okay. It wasn't as self-leveling on the first coat, which I was kind of surprised by, but it did even out really nicely on 2 coats. So while I personally think this is passable on 2 for that really nice jelly look, you could wear it in 3 coats as well just to build up the color, the intensity a little bit more, but obviously because these are jellies, you are still going to see some nail line. Next we have Sherbet Jelly, which was previously released as Fuyū Jelly, and this one is described as an orange coral. I definitely think that's a pretty accurate way to describe this color because it is orange, but it definitely has a lot of these warm coral kind of undertones. So I think maybe this could be a chameleon kind of shade, you know, depending on your skin tone or your undertones. It might lean a little bit more orange. On some people, it might lean even more coral. I think on me, it definitely leans more orangey. You know, it's a little bit warm, but not as pinky coral as some other photos. So that being said, I love this color. It is just one of my favorites when it originally came out as Fuyū Jelly, and this one also had a really nice formula. The next polish we have is Açaí Jelly, which is a dusty dark purple. Now, if you're new to jellies, you might be surprised to see the coverage on this one, but if you have watched my massive swatch video on all of Cirque's jellies, you may remember the pattern that these darker jellies just tend to be even more sheer than you would expect. So as you saw, that first coat was just super thin, and it was even for the most part, but unfortunately my second coat turned out more uneven. It's possible I just had too much polish on the brush and it started to pool towards the right side of my nail, but this is also unfortunately one of the jellies that just kept pulling away from the tips of my nail. So even though I was trying to cap the free edge, it just would keep pulling down away from it, which is why my tip looks so much darker. Then we have Pitaya Jelly, which is described as a magenta pink. I think calling this magenta is definitely pretty accurate, where it's very much in between pink and purple. The application on this one definitely felt a little bit better, similar to the first couple of polishes in the collection, but unfortunately I did kind of have that same issue with the tips, where as you saw, I capped my tip, but then immediately after it just kind of looks like it pulled away. Though I will say it did look a lot better after doing 2 and especially 3 coats. So yeah, other than that, the formula was great. It was very even coverage, super squishy and glassy. I definitely do prefer this one in 3 coats as well, just because it makes the color a bit more punchy. The next shade we have is Curaçao Jelly, which is described as a vivid turquoise green. So disclaimer, you know, if you haven't seen my review videos before, these specific shades of turquoise or teals, they just always pick up more blue on my iPhone camera, especially under this setup here. So it's not picking up color accurate. I think on camera it is picking up way more blue, but that being said, I still don't think I would agree with calling it a turquoise green. To me, it still very much is more on like the blue side, but with a lot of green undertones, you know, like a turquoise, or maybe a teal is a better way to describe this color. Either way, it still is really pretty, and I thought it was even coverage enough to wear on 2 coats, but I definitely prefer it in 3. And rounding out the collection, we have Sweet Mint, which is described as a light green crelly. So this is the true crelly finish of the collection, which basically means it has a little bit more opacity or pigment, so it's not as glassy as the previous shades, which are true jellies. I thought this one had a really fantastic formula that was super self-leveling. Like even when I was reapplying in a certain spot over and over again, it just immediately immediately leveled out, so I thought, you know, that was really great. The unfortunate thing is the color, where it's just very, very white based. I know it's described as a light green, but I feel like you only really get a hint of that on the third coat, so I just wish it was a little bit more green. And here is a collage of the collection worn in 2 coats each in direct sunlight. So as expected, Açaí on the bottom right hand is looking super sheer, where it almost looks like 1 coat, and even Sweet Mint has a decent amount of nail line, especially considering that one is just the lightest in color. So I figured for those 2 I can do a 3rd coat, which is what you see on the top row, and I definitely think they look a lot better. They just have much better coverage. And for Curaçao in the middle, I wanted to show it in slightly lower lighting because I feel like it looked a little bit more color accurate with like more of that greenish teal undertone, but I really struggled getting it color accurate on my phone. Getting into comparisons, we're starting with Lolly Jelly, and of course I have to show this next to XOXO, which is the hot pink jelly in Cirque's catalog, but I also thought to show it next to Poppy Jelly as well, which I wouldn't call pink. That's more of like a hot orangey kind of color, but it's close enough like in value that I figured I could show them all together. I actually think Poppy Jelly might be even closer than XOXO because it is like that warm, almost corally kind of shade. Even though XOXO is pink, it's more of a blue toned pink, and it's a little bit deeper as well, so I definitely wouldn't call these dupes. I did also have to compare it to a couple of warm pink jellies in my collection, like Cirque's Guayaba Jelly and ILNP's Pink Slush. Both of those are technically like dupes to each other, and they're way too light to be a dupe for Lolly. That one's just a lot deeper and even more warmer toned, I think. So you can really tell the difference here, especially on the first coat alone. But I decided for the 2nd or 3rd coats that I wanted to layer Guayaba up by itself, and then for ILNP to see if I could kind of recreate Lolly by sandwiching Malibu in between Pink Slush. I think it's close, but not as warm as Lolly. So I thought to recreate it with just the Cirque jellies, like layering Guayaba over Poppy to get more of that warm undertone, but unfortunately this was still a little too light. Then for Sherbet Jelly, I of course had to show this next to the original Fuyū jelly from the MXM Tune collection, just to see, you know, if there was a difference, and I was kind of surprised to see that there was. It is very, very subtle though, where I think Sherbet is just a little bit deeper and warmer, but I don't know, maybe it's just a batch issue. For a comparison to some other orangey, peachy shades from Cirque, here it is next to Saffron Jelly on the left and Peach Jelly on the right. Even though I said Sherbet leans more orange on me, it's definitely not as much of a true orange like Saffron. And I also wanted to show it next to ILNP's Tango, which is their orange jelly polish. That one is, I guess, more similar to Saffron Jelly, but a bit darker and also warmer. So I don't find it as light or yellow leaning as Saffron, which makes it a little bit more similar to Sherbet, but not quite. So I thought, again, maybe to try to recreate it, I could layer Pink Slush over that to sort of lighten it and bring more of that pink color, but it wasn't really close. Maybe if I did 2 coats of Pink Slush over 1 coat of Tango, that would be better. Moving on to Açaí Jelly, I have Eros Jelly and Royal Jelly, both of which are the 2 darker purples from Cirque. As you can see though, they are a lot darker and also more vibrant in color. They're not as muted as Açaí. So to get more of those gray muted tones, I thought I could show this next to Haze Jelly, which is a muted purple, but that's just several shades way too light, and also next to Zen Jelly, which is darker, closer in value, but that one's more of that gray, purple, brown kind of color. So definitely not a dupe on its own, but I thought it would be the perfect sort of undertone underneath Royal Jelly to recreate Açaí. I feel like I got really close, but this is only 2 coats of Açaí. Next for Pitaya, I knew I had to see this next to Berry Jelly, which is this other mid-toned red-leaning purple, and I figured I could also show it next to Lilac Jelly, which is a lot more cool-toned, like more blue-leaning, and it is lighter as well. So Berry Jelly is definitely the closest, so I am just going to show these 2 side by side. On the first coat here, it might be kind of hard to see a difference, but I will say that Pitaya has a little bit of a brighter pink-leaning kind of color, while Berry Jelly is a little bit deeper and more purple leaning, maybe a little bit more muted too. So I wouldn't call these dupes, but they definitely are the closest of the jellies that I've compared so far. And again, to try and recreate Pitaya, I thought to layer Berry Jelly over XOXO for that hot pink color, but it was a little too dark. Then for Curaçao Jelly, I have it next to Aqua Jelly and Lagoon Jelly. Aqua is more of like a true sky blue kind of shade, and Lagoon is a little bit more green leaning, dare I say more aqua in color, but those are both way too light to compare. But I knew I wanted to see Curaçao next to these two shades because I just knew they were going to be closer. The first one is Verdigris Jelly, which is like a darker tealy green sort of shade, and then ILNP's Turquoise Water, which I thought was going to be an exact dupe. It's definitely really close, and especially much closer than Verdigris because that one is just way too dark, especially once you build it up in 2 or 3 coats. But ILNP is a little bit more blue leaning, while Curaçao is more of like a teal. And lastly, for Sweet Mint, here it is next to Jade Jelly and Lime Jelly, both of which are the lighter 2 jelly greens from Cirque. Jade is a little too dark and muted, more blue toned, and while Lime Jelly is just so much more vibrant and yellow leaning, I thought I could use that as the base underneath Linen to sort of recreate Sweet Mint. It's a little bit streaky, but I admittedly like the color more. And lastly, I figured I could show Sweet Mint next to ILNP's Dollhouse, which is the light green Crelly from the recent Rewind collection. That one has a dainty hollow sparkle, but even aside from that, the base colors of the greens are just very different. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons for Cirque's Glazed collection for 2025. As always, I would love to know what you think of this release, and especially if you picked any of them up already. As I'm sure you know, I'm a big jelly lover, and Cirque definitely dominates the jelly field. Though I do have to say, I feel like this collection is probably my least favorite of the ones they've done so far, mainly for the theme. I feel like there just wasn't as clear of a theme for this one. The other ones just felt more cohesive in my opinion, but if anything, I actually feel more conflicted about them bringing back Fuyū jelly as Sherbet Jelly, because on one hand, it is exciting to see because Fuyū was one of my favorites. I really love that shade. But on the other hand, it does put a bit of a bad taste in my mouth because it was a previous limited edition collaboration shade specifically. I know we all know that Cirque loves to bring back these previous limited edition shades, but the fact that this is a collaboration shade is what like rubs me the wrong way a little bit, because the collaborator is no longer benefiting from the polish that they came out with from their own collection. I've seen a couple of people kind of speculating on Reddit that the same thing happened with the purple from the Moonstruck collection earlier this year, that it looks suspiciously similar to Venetian Sky from the Kelly Marissa collection. But as far as I know, Cirque hasn't admitted to that the way that they did about Sherbet Jelly being re-released. And to be fair, I don't know how collaborating with Cirque really works. I would assume, or at the very least hope, that whoever they're collaborating with is getting paid, especially if they're the ones coming up with like the colors and the descriptions, all that kind of stuff. But even if it was unpaid, I feel like it just still isn't the best look to bring back a previous collaboration shade. So I'm really curious to know what you guys think about that aspect specifically. But as far as like, you know, the collection goes, they were great for the most part. It's hard to be mad at like their jellies because they just have, again, dominated that field, this specific finish. It's just their bread and butter at this point, I feel like. And as you saw, for the most part, I just had a really good experience with the application on these. The only ones I wasn't really super impressed with were Açaí and Sweet Mint. Açaí for its like formula, which I feel like again tends to happen with a lot of the dark darker colors where they're just like even more sheer than you would expect. And even though that one was a little streaky or patchy for me during my live swatch, I feel like it did look a lot better once I did like my full hand swatch, so I'm not too mad at it. But the other one that was kind of a letdown was Sweet Mint, just because I feel like the color is so light. But at least, you know, with my experimenting, you know, with the recreations or dupes, I was able to find out that, you know, layering linen over lime jelly makes for a really pretty green. I definitely just need to be more careful with my application to not have a streaky mess. So again, definitely let me know what you think of these shades, and if you are interested in getting them, if you haven't done so already. As a reminder, I am an affiliate with Beyond Polish, so you can use my affiliate link or code down in the description box down below. If you use either of those, that gives me a small commission, which helps support me and my channel. So as always, a big thank you to all of you who do support me through that. But even if you don't plan on picking anything up, I hope that you still like the video, especially if you found it helpful for the comparison. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!